Why did Russia start this war?
Well, I mean, if you wanted a sort of a theoretical 30,000-foot answer, Putin has repeatedly referred to the collapse of the Soviet Union as the greatest disaster of the 20th century. And he meant it, right? And so he's been trying, and he hasn't been shy about it, ever since he's been in charge, which seems now like about 100 years, to recreate the glory, the strength of the former Soviet Union in some capacity. Not entirely. He's not crazy, but he is completely jonesing for some form of a stronger Russia, and in his mind, that means he's got to have a buffer zone between him and NATO, right? And so this is part of that. He also considers, if you think about it, right here, he's basically saying, "This is mine," right? If you think that,
which is the east of
this is the eastern part of Ukraine, right here is Ukraine. Front line, this is not, I mean, I'm simplifying this, but the front line stretches about 600 miles. He's also annexed, of course, Crimea, but that's another issue here, and that's the only port for their Black Sea fleet, which the Ukrainian military has frankly destroyed almost at this stage of the game. But they own, at this stage, they've got about 20% of Ukraine, if you were to say, stop the shooting now. And then the problem is that at the outset of this war, Zelensky and the Ukrainian government said, the only answer here is total victory. We have to get all our territory back. Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, we have to get it all back. And that is not, again, it's not satisfying to say this, but it's not possible, right? So the problem that is being faced right now is when this war got started in the first year and a half, everybody was, they were putting their flags, Ukrainian flags on their porch. They were putting a little flag on their X site, their Twitter site. And there's no doubt the Ukrainian military has been incredibly courageous, and the population of Ukraine has put up with a great deal. Look, the months of September and October of this year, those 2 months, there's only been one night when Kyiv hasn't been under attack by Russian drones, right? Which is, if you think about it, is insane, right? And that's just Kyiv. All their major cities have also been under attack by the Russians. They've destroyed much of their energy infrastructure. Now, a bright spot was for the Ukrainian military was that they did a surprise offensive into Kursk, which is Russian territory. And in doing that, that was the first time there were foreign troops on Russian turf, right, since World War II. And that really shocked the hell out of Putin and the Russian military. And they acted as if they really didn't know how to respond, didn't have the resources to respond. But this is a game of attrition, right? We're going into our full third year early this coming year. And what's kept them in the fight is U.S. support and EU or NATO support. And the EU's done a very good job. I mean, look, they've picked up a great part of the effort. Without that support, this thing would never have lasted this long, never. And so I think Putin, in part, has been very surprised. He miscalculated a lot of things, but he miscalculated the sort of support that Ukraine would receive from NATO in particular. And
why is NATO giving so much support? Why is this in their interests?
Well, think about where Ukraine is.
Yeah.
Think about where Poland is. Look, Russian missiles have flown errantly into Poland. Their history tells them or informs them that if Putin takes this,
Ukraine,
it takes Ukraine, then it's not as if he's going to say, okay, I'm done, I'm finished, right? They believe, now whether they're right or not, this answers the question about why such strong NATO support. They believe that that's not his inclination, right? It's not in his character to say, that's all I want. I'm good.
What do you think?
I take him at his word when he says he wants to recreate the former Soviet Union in a fashion. Do I think this is enough of a buffer from NATO for him? I don't think so. Do I think he might consider moving a little bit further north? Look, he already has. This is Belarus. Belarus is a solid ally of Putin. But is there a chance that, he says to himself, well, maybe over here, he's already made verbal threats up here.
Is that Latvia?
Latvia, yeah. And so I think I understand what their mindset is. It's like Israel, right? It's like, oh my God, why is Israel acting the way they do? Well, because they're surrounded by a ring of terrorist proxies that all are there to serve the purpose of the Iranian regime, which is to destroy Israel. So that's their mindset, right? We don't live there. We don't understand it. So to say, okay, well, that's ridiculous for someone in the U.S. to go, it's ridiculous that that's Putin. Okay, well, fuck off. You don't live here, right? You're not in Poland watching this if he takes over Ukraine. And so...
And World War II wasn't so long ago.
Exactly.
And it wasn't until I studied World War II, which actually wasn't very long ago, it was about 6 months ago, that I understood the sort of geopolitical backdrop as to why you need to defend Ukraine. Because when you see, you can probably explain it better than me, but what Hitler did, and he just took a little bit, was it like Czechoslovakia?
Yeah,
just a little bit.
Take
and
this
then,
piece.
And
That's
then a
all I
little
want.
bit more.
Yeah.
And then he took a little bit more, and then a little bit more. And by the end of it, he was trying to take the UK, he was trying to take Russia, he was trying to take the lot.
Over here in the States, right, you had this isolationist feeling. So World War II is happening, and they don't want any of it, right? They went through World War I. They sent a lot of their boys over, and they were like, no, screw it. Look, we got this big ocean here. We don't have to worry about it. And yeah, that's a problem. But you see that now. There's some of this isolationist attitude, which is, why do we even care? And that's okay, fine. That's a great question to ask. People should ask questions like that. But yeah, I'm telling you, having worked against Russia for a long period of time, it's a mistake not to take Putin at his word, right? And we tend to always mirror our values. It's like when we were talking about the cab driver, how do you get him into a conversation? Well, you start to mirror the values, right? And we do that as a nation sometimes in the U.S., where we imagine that people are going to react the same way or think the same way about freedom or democracy, whatever. And it's not how the world works. So just going back here to the incursion into Russia that the Ukrainian military did. So they're holding territory up there. Maybe it depends on who you talk to. Maybe 500 square miles. It varies, but they've stretched their resources relatively thin, and that's a problem because it all goes back to war. As long as we've known war, which is supply lines, right? If you can't maintain your supply lines, you've lost the plot, and so. What we're seeing right now is Putin has amassed about 40,000 Russian troops and about 10,000 North Korean troops, and that's another story. So North Korea, because Kim Jong-un of North Korea is best buddies now with Putin, he has sent upwards of 12,000 troops to Russia, and they are now on the front lines. Essentially, they're already in combat, but they're an important part of Putin's effort, and I think what he's trying to do, Trump has won, takes us back to our original point of, okay, what's Trump going to do and what's this going to look like after the inauguration. Trump's won. I think there's a calculation here. Putin could be saying, I've got to do everything now. I've got to throw everything I can to gain that Russian territory back before sitting down at a negotiating table and coming up with a deal. Because I don't want to sit at a negotiating table if Zelensky and NATO are saying, well, we have part of your Russian territory. You want it back? Well, we're going to need this back. We're going to need Eastern Ukraine back, or we're going to need Crimea back. I don't think he's ever given back Crimea, right? But it's likely, I think, if you have to make these decisions, and without real insight into his mindset, it's true, it's all speculation. But I wouldn't be surprised if what he's calculated right now is I got to throw all these troops to regain this Russian territory the Ukrainians surprised us by taking, ahead of sitting down and doing a negotiated settlement, which again is going to be very unsatisfying to all those people who put Ukrainian flags on their porch and they're going to get all their territory back. No, they're not. They don't have the ability to do that. And I hope that what we don't see is if Trump, when Trump comes into office, I think he and the people that he will have around him working on this issue will be sufficiently convinced that they have to maintain a level of support that allows Ukraine to sit down at the negotiating table from at least a position of relative strength. Right? Otherwise, they're just sitting and they're asking, for whatever they can get in this deal, and that's never going to sell. Zelensky's got to sell this to the Ukrainian population. This is an incredible moment in time, right? This is an invading force from Russia into another country, an independent country. And there's so much complexity here. It's hard to explain, and without saying, okay, we're going to take the next 5 or 6 days to talk about it. But it's an incredible moment in time, and so yes, it matters a great deal about is this consequential? It's consequential if worst case scenario, the next administration says that's it, we're cutting off all assistance and all aid. Well, the rest of NATO will definitely stay in the game, right? Because they view it differently, because they're right here. But U.S. support is critical, and it's critical to get a settlement. And if what you want is to end war, to stop the killing, and if you're pragmatic, you have to assume this is going to be a settlement that means that Russia's going to keep maybe not all of this, maybe they'll keep this much, and this will be maybe a demilitarized zone, right? Patrolled by UN peacekeepers or whatever, to act as a buffer. But then you have other issues. Is Putin going to say, no, part of this deal has got to be that Ukraine never joins NATO? And I'm sure that's going to be a part of his deal. Mm-hmm. And then how NATO deals with that, I have no idea. Because they've already made sort of the guarantee, okay, you're going to be in at some point. Anyway, that's...
How do you think it ends if you had to bet?
I think, look, part of the reason why the North Korean troops have ended up in Russia, which is an astounding thing, is because Putin desperately doesn't want to do another conscription. He knows that's vastly unpopular with his folks.
Which is when you ask you
basically
everyday people
round up more people, right? I'm going to need another 150,000 soldiers, because he runs what's essentially called a meat grinder operation. He just throws people in the front, right, as cannon fodder. I mean, the Russian casualty rate has been ridiculous, right, compared to the Ukrainians, but they've been willing to sacrifice all those people. So I think the idea being, look, Kim Jong-un, he's making money off of this deal, sending troops up there. He's getting the troops that survive anyway, will get combat experience, and he doesn't have a military with any combat experience right now. And he's also getting weapons technology transfer from Russia. So he's getting part of a deal here. What's Putin getting? I think Putin's just getting bodies he can throw out there ahead of the next wave, which will be Russian troops, right? So I think those 10,000 North Koreans soldiers are fucked.
There's been a rising sentiment in the United States that we should stop sending money to Ukraine, and why are we bothering, and this isn't our problem, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. What do you say to those people? Because that sentiment is rising, and it's rising, from my opinion, it's rising on the right side of politics. Mm-hmm. I hear it more and more on some of the big podcasts. I hear it more and more on X and Twitter. Mm-hmm. And again, it's only because I researched what happened in Nazi Germany in World War II that I suddenly go, okay, this is much more complicated than you think. Yeah. And you can embolden someone if you don't resist them invading a local country.
Yeah.
And why stop at one?
Right. Well, look, I mean, this, and the thing is, I mean, the world is shrinking, right? The world is, and has been and continues to shrink. Nothing happens in a bubble. So what's happening right here is being watched by, Xi Jinping in China. Right, in terms of Taiwan. I mean, he's sitting there saying, okay, here's Taiwan. There's a strait of Taiwan. There's no distance whatsoever. He's just conducted, Xi Jinping and the Chinese regime has just conducted the largest military exercise around Taiwan ever, basically blocking it off, blocking the ports and, patrolling the airways. So the idea being he just wanted to show that he could do that, right? And So he's watching what's happening over here in terms of the U.S. response and NATO response, and he's saying, okay, at what point does it make sense for me to do this? Because at the end of the day, Xi Jinping is tied to his desired legacy, which is the reunification. And in his mind, this belongs right here. Right? So
we'll move on to China then.
Yeah.
Question was, how do you think it ends if you're a betting man? How do you think the Ukrainian war ends?
I think in this coming year, I think in part, I know I've talked a lot about what the Ukrainians are suffering from, but there are reasons why Putin is going to need to figure this out as well. I think part of it is his economy is suffering. And so I think it finishes with a negotiated settlement at some point during 2025. And I think that means the lines are going to look, again, I keep using the word unsatisfactory, but that's the way it's going to feel to a lot of people. The lines are going to look a lot like they did before the invasion. Maybe some additional territory being held by the Russians. And then I do think that there will be some agreement to have a buffer zone that will be essentially under the auspices of UN peacekeeping troops somehow. A no-fly zone, whatever you want to call it as well. I think that's how it's going to end up. I think Kursk, that region in Russia, goes back to the Russians. I think the problem's going to be, I think in the short order, I think they're going to want to move quickly, right, before we get into the teeth of winter. I think that's going to be a mess. So that's going to be a major, when they start that offensive, and we're talking, again, potentially 50,000 troops thrown at a relatively thin line, I think that territory goes back to Russia.
In the next month?
I would suspect, yeah. I mean, basically, you don't put troops there, with all those resources without intending to use them. And I think the longer those North Korean troops sit there, the more trouble they will have in terms of command and control. So they're going to want to get them into the cannon as quickly as possible.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.